Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. We're going to talk about the funding priorities of Pennsylvania's local governments. But first, we're joined by Jillian McGoldrick from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Welcome, Jillian.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You filed a story about the president appointing Governor Josh Shapiro to a panel. What is the name of this panel, and what are they charged with doing?
Yeah, Governor Shapiro was one of 10 governors, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, appointed to the Council of Governors. It's a little-known panel that is impaneled every 2 years since 2010, and it is charged with managing state and federal partnerships, as well as providing advice on different national security or National Guard responses.
Well, as far as any specific area is concerned, Jillian, where might Josh Shapiro make the strongest contribution?
Yeah, I think that Pennsylvania is one of the largest states in the country. So just on that fact, he will definitely play a role. He is some of the other members of this panel include Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The co-chairs are Governor Josh Stein from North Carolina and Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. And some of the other Democratic governors include Governor Wes Moore from Maryland and Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. Both of them are seen as some of the Democratic frontrunners for the 2028 Democratic primary, as well as Governor Shapiro.
How much direction will the president give the Council of Governors?
I'm not totally sure that the president himself is very involved in this. The way that it works is they can be called together for different sessions by the co-chairs or by the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of Homeland Security or a number of other federal security officials.
What does Governor Josh Shapiro have to say about this appointment?
He said that he would be bringing Pennsylvania's priorities to the panel, to the other governors. And he said that he did that just yesterday. He said that he did that when he was down in Washington, D.C. for the National Governors Association, when he visited the White House. There are some photos where you can see him sitting next to Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. At one of the White House receptions, amongst a bunch of other governors from both parties. And he credited his work and his conversations down there as the reason why about $2.1 billion of Pennsylvania federal funding that had been frozen is now accessible. I did reach out to the White House to confirm whether his conversations were the reason why those federal funds were starting to flow again. But he said he had made the case directly to members of Trump's cabinet while he was down in D.C. As part of this panel and as part of the National Governors Association winter meeting.
Jillian, let's talk some more about the makeup of this panel, the Council of Governors. You said that it has 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, so the even balance between the major parties is obvious. What else do we know about the method for selecting these governors? I mean, after all, 10 out of 50, there must have been some kind of process to select them.
Yeah, it's actually out of 55.
55?
The governors, yes, the governors of different U.S. territories as well are also part of the National Governors Association.
Interesting.
But anyway, there is not much available about how President Trump made this decision. It does seem like they cycle through governors pretty quickly. Only one of the governors that is on the panel has served on it before, and that was Governor Gretchen Whitmer. This is now her 3rd term. Everybody else is new. So it does seem that they want to cycle through them and make sure that they get to play an advisory role on this panel.
Jillian, you know the president's been busy since he took office. So what is the significance, do you suppose, of the formation of this panel while the president is trying to eliminate federal jobs?
I think it is one of the responsibilities of the president. He needs to appoint at this time, though we know that President Trump is really redefining what is a requirement of the federal government at this time. So I do think that he is. I do think it was a responsibility that he had to do at this time. And again, it is mainly an advisory role. They gather together, and then those governors also go back to the rest of the governors of the country to share information about before anything is made public.
A last question, Jillian. As you pointed out, Governor Shapiro sued the president, or rather tried to sue the president for holding back federal funds, but now those funds have become unfrozen. And I wonder how the dynamic of that whole situation figures into this panel being put together.
Yeah, I wonder the same as well. It is interesting that just very shortly after Governor Shapiro chose to sue the Trump administration over these federal funds, he was appointed to the Council of Governors. However, Governor Shapiro does not have the most challenging relationship with President Trump among Democratic governors at this time. There was a very interesting back and forth at the White House at this event that the governor attended with the Maine governor, Laura Healey, in which she kept President Trump brought up a law that about transgender women in sports, and he called out Maine specifically and said, "Is Maine here? Is Maine here?" And she just kept saying, "See you in court." So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Jillian McGoldrick from the Philadelphia Inquirer. More of the PCN Capitol Preview after a short break.
This week on It's History.
You also had groups of Continentals that were wearing stolen British regimental coats from the Battle of Saratoga. Now, this was much to the chagrin of George Washington and the higher-ups, but that's all they had. So you had men, American Continentals, wearing red uniforms, and it was just a mess. You can imagine how that's crazy.
PCN brings you live coverage of the 2025 PIAA Swimming and Diving Championships. Watch Pennsylvania's top swimmers and divers compete live from Bucknell University March 12th through the 15th. Champions will be crowned, records may be broken. Watch it all on PCN or stream with PCN Select. Learn more at PCNTV.com. PCN is Pennsylvania Sports.
Welcome back. Our guests are Ron Grutza from the PA State Association of Boroughs, Amy Sturges from the PA Municipal League, and Sherene Hess from the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania. Ron, how are you reacting in just a general sense to the governor's appropriation?
Yeah, the governor had his speech a few weeks ago, laid out $51 billion general fund budget. Of course, it's 7% more than this fiscal year. There are a lot of things in the governor's proposal that local governments can feel very good about. We're happy to see the more money for volunteer fire companies, $30 million grant program, the $50 million extra dollars for investment into housing stock renovation. Somewhat like the whole home repairs program, which was done under the American Rescue Plan dollars.
And review that program just briefly, what it does.
Sure. The whole home repairs program was a program which money was available for owner-occupied houses to make necessary repairs, things that they couldn't actually afford. So it really is a blight-saving measure to get some money into these homes, which would otherwise fall into disuse and become blighted. So,
now, that was proposed last year, but lawmakers didn't embrace it.
correct, right. So we're back again for trying to get $50 million for this program. We think that is a wise investment of the Commonwealth's dollars. We're also very happy again to see Main Street Matters is another $20 million for this year.
What is that for?
Main Street Matters, the governor proposed that last year. It did get funded at $20 million. It's investing in our downtowns. And in boroughs, we have downtowns. We have a lot of exciting things, nice shops and restaurants.
So it's about fixing up Main Street, making it more attractive.
Exactly. Facade improvements for businesses as well. And it does dovetail with the current very popular Main Street and Elm Street programs.
How about you, Amy? What do you think of this budget that's been proposed by the governor?
Well, in terms of local government, there are some things that we're very interested in. As Ron was saying, there's money for housing stock, but there's also a couple other housing programs, money for the State Planning Board to help with technical assistance for municipalities in terms of their planning. Also, $10 million for first-time home buyers to help with closing costs. So that's very positive for us. There's also money for transit. A number of our communities do, and their residents rely on public transit, and that is definitely not just in need in Philadelphia, but across the Commonwealth. So we are pleased to see that. And we're also very interested in the proposals for skill games regulation and adult use cannabis in either case.
As potential revenue generators?
Correct. We understand that the state needs revenue generation, but at the local level, those two activities will have a big impact at the local level in terms of enforcement and police activity, police public safety, and the need for law enforcement to be aware of and participating in the enforcement of those two activities. So we need to see revenue for local governments if either one of those are licensed and regulated at the state level.
Sherene, I'm told we got your microphone fixed. What do you make of this new budget proposed by Governor Shapiro?
Well, certainly we saw many positive proposals and for the counties, and my co-panelists outlined some of those that affect county government as well. So we're pleased to see that. One thing we are hoping to have more discussion on is the budgeted amount for mental health funding. The governor proposed $20 million increase. And while we're grateful for that, we are advocating for even more because what we have is a system in crisis. And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Well, Sherene,
yeah.
Sherene, describe some of those mental health services. Try to be as specific as you can.
Sure. So there are all sorts of different kinds of treatments and preventative and otherwise for folks who are in need of mental health services. And we see that need increasing greatly over, especially since the pandemic, but even before that, mental health needs were really on the increase. So we know that the system is just being crushed. We have workforce issues. There are services, walk-in treatment centers that are in need of people to run them, but also just general infrastructure related to those, brick and mortar kinds of things. And then you have medication issues, and you have a number of, we're seeing the range from children needing these services to seniors and everyone in between. So we know that systems, the individuals in the systems are fantastic, but they are reaching their limit as well. But we know they can only do so much when the system needs that boost. So that is one of our main things that we're advocating for this year.
My understanding, Sherene, is that the governor wants to give mental health services an additional $20 million. What do you think of that figure? What can you accomplish with it?
Well, we certainly appreciate $20 million. The system has undergone cuts, year after year, and we know the need is really in the 1 billion amount, and we had asked last year for 250 million to kind of start filling that gap, and we did not receive that. So we are back. We understand the fiscal constraints. We certainly understand that. But we're asking for 100 million this time, and we believe that will help us get more services for those folks who are involved in the now. A lot of times mental health needs often have an individual interacting with the legal system, unfortunately. But that does happen, so we want to use some of those funds for that arena. We also, as I mentioned, need to increase the walk-in treatment centers. We have workforce needs. There are any number of needs related to preventing that individual from having to go either to the ER or into the legal system. So those are just a few of the things that we can do. Each county is a little different, but we do have an overlapping kind of underlying need for all the 67 counties in that arena.
In general, Sherene, how long does it take for a person to get mental health services? I understand there could be a waiting list involved.
Yes, and every county is different, but a lot of times you're seeing many months to get just an appointment, to get an assessment, let alone treatment and those kinds of things. So yeah, the aim of this, what we're advocating for, is so that every person who is in need can get timely treatment and without undue burden to them and their family.
Are mental health services something that would come under the borough's purview as well? Is there any overlap here, Ron?
Only in terms of the police services. If there are any types, as we saw, unfortunately, this past weekend with the tragedy at the hospital in York. Right. So, certainly our boroughs, of course, we don't administer those type of services. That's with the counties, but there are certainly effects of that.
Does that go for the third-class cities too, Amy?
Yes, it does. It's for any municipality, the impact of not having mental health services at the county level will filter down to cities, boroughs, and townships, mainly, as Ron said, in the police enforcement area, but it certainly is an issue.
Amy, let's keep the focus on you for a minute.
Sure.
A few minutes ago, you did acknowledge potential revenue generators that are being proposed by the governor, and you mentioned the legalization of recreational marijuana and so-called skill games. And I wonder how closely you're watching that debate and what you stand to gain and what your position is on legalizing either of these endeavors.
Well, as I mentioned, our position is that if they are legalized, regulated at the state level, then local government should have a share in the revenue that's generated, because the impact will be at the local level. So that is our position. Our members are also in the skill games area. Some of them are not that inclined to want skill games in their communities. So they would be looking for the ability to opt out and say, we prefer not to have skill games in our community, and obviously not receive any state funding then or state revenue from them, but we don't want them in our community, so we would like to be able to opt out.
So that's a reflection of current opinion right now. Some people in the third-class cities don't want these skill games there.
Correct. And I should say that the Municipal League represents cities, boroughs, and townships. We used to be just an organization for third-class cities, but we have expanded our membership to cities, boroughs, and townships, mainly full-service communities, mainly urban, suburban, but our membership is now at least half cities, half boroughs and townships.
And as far as the Boroughs Association is concerned, what do you think of these potential revenue generators?
Well, I'll focus on the skills games proposal. The governor is proposing somewhat similar tax as the video game terminals at 52%.
Right.
The industry, they want maybe a little bit lower tax at 16%. So if there could be some type of compromise there in the middle, of course, we're talking about revenue generation. So
Right.
I think the governor's proposal is somewhat would generate $300 and some million. For our members, we are interested in a local share, whether there's a local share or an opt-out, as Amy had articulated.
Has the governor been very specific on where revenue might go if these things are legalized?
Well, yeah, the 5% would go to the lottery fund. 47% would go to the general fund after local share assessment would be distributed.
How about you, Sherene? Are you keeping track of this debate with respect to skill games or recreational marijuana as potential revenue generators?
Those are issues that counties do pay attention to, but it's not something that we focus on. We're really focusing on our legislative priorities that are outlined, that we did outline. So we keep an eye on it. We'll just say that.
So let me turn then to another of your legislative priorities, Sherene, and that would be about making changes to our mail-in voting system. First of all, why are changes necessary? What kind of problems have the counties encountered since this became a legal form of voting in about the last 5 years?
Yeah, that's right. And like mental health funding and services, elections is one of the core services of county government. And since 2019, when Act 77 was enacted, we've had the option, voters have had the option to have a mail-in ballot, and it's very popular, but the statute is somewhat unclear on several aspects of that option. And so that's what counties are really advocating for, is to have some clarity to the act. And so we have two main elements of that. There are several things that are unclear, and we'll focus on them, but the two main things we're talking about are the ability to do pre-canvassing, meaning that we could take those mail-in ballots, absentee and otherwise, and have a way to process them, not count them, but process them up to before the election day, so that we can focus on the actual elections going on in the precincts on election day.
How many days?
I'm sorry?
How many days would you like to have before the election to start your pre-canvassing? Like you said, it's not counting the votes, but it's the idea of, removing ballots from envelopes, really, and flattening them out, right?
Correct, yes. That kind of labor-intensive, time-consuming thing. We think that, an average of 3 to 5 days would certainly be adequate. Even a couple of days is helpful. So it's the main thing is we hope that we're at the table if it gets to that point of discussion, so that we can share our experiences. We have very seasoned elections officials who handle that kind of activity, and they know the very nuances of that could be very helpful to the discussion.
How much uniformity is there between counties for solving mail-in ballot problems?
Well, that is our conundrum, is the statute leaves some of these items up to interpretation, and every county just has that ability to decide whether they want to have the ability to notify voters that there's a disqualifying error on their envelope, and that they may come in to the office and correct that before election day. And whether drop boxes, for instance, and then there's just a few of these kinds of issues that counties are making their own decisions, and what it does is it creates a bit of I want to say distrust in the system. We're very confident at the county level that counties are doing all the right things, and there are so many sets of eyes on this process from start to end, that we know we have a full trust in that. But sometimes things happen, and the public may have may not know those nuances. So we want to ensure that the public has full trust in their elections process.
Sherene, what have we learned from elections past? In other words, how are counties supposed to address mail-in ballots that come in and don't have the secrecy envelope?
Yeah, so there's an elections board in each county, and those ballots that have a possible disqualifying error are set aside. Then they're considered at an elections board meeting, and there are some things that the statute is very clear about. The outer envelope must have a signature. There must be a secrecy envelope included. Then there are other things related to the date that have been, a subject of interpretation and actually are being looked at by the courts. So every county has this elections board meeting following the election, and there are, any number of decisions made. They're all within the statute because the statute doesn't clarify. So, their solicitors are involved, and we know that these decisions are being made. That uniformity is an issue.
And what have the courts accomplished so far, and why is the state Supreme Court wanting to look at it again? It seems like it's in court, then it's out of court, and try to bring me up to date on all the court activity.
Yeah, and that is a tricky subject because they're, as you say, the different courts have made some decisions, and then it's been in one court and another court. And right now we are waiting for a decision related to the ability to use a provisional in the case that a voter does not have a signed envelope. So there are any number of nuances going on there. We're going to wait and see what the courts have to say.
All right, I'm going to give our guests a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for PCN. More budget hearings from the Capitol on Wednesday. First, the House Appropriations Committee will hear from the Attorney General at 10 a.m., followed by the Agriculture Department at 1 p.m., then from the State Judiciary at 3 p.m. The governor is proposing a tax on so-called skill games. Mike Barley from Pacematic, a company that develops software for skill games, joins us for On the Issues on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Then right after that, we'll talk about a new report called No Hate in Our State. The executive director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, Chad Dion Lassiter, will tell us about it on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. On Journalist Roundtable this week, our guest will be E.V. DeJesus from Penn Live and the Patriot News, Lindsay Weber from the Morning Call, and Aaliyah Schneider from the Philadelphia Inquirer. They'll give us the latest news from the Capitol on Thursday at 7 p.m. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free of charge on the internet. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Now we're talking about legislative priorities here today with the representatives of local governments. And Ron, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation because I understand one of your legislative priorities has to do with the right to know law.
Yeah.
First, acquaint us with the right to know law and how it connects with the boroughs.
Sure, Larry. The right to know law is a law which presumes that all of our governmental records are open, unless specifically otherwise stated for certainly reasonable items, such as bank account numbers, things like that. The right to know law was reenacted in Pennsylvania in 2008, usually after a wholesale reenactment such as that. 4 or 5 years later, there's some cleanup that's done. However, here we are, we're still waiting for that cleanup. Our members are asking for two things, two reforms with the right to know law. The first is they deal with these burdensome and vexatious requesters. They come in and they basically weaponize the law and they make voluminous requests, something that the current law really does not recognize. And a person can really shut down a small municipal office by making these burdensome requests. So what we're asking for is a process at the Office of Open Records so that our members could petition the office, deem someone vexatious with a proper due process, and be relieved from fulfilling any other open records request. The second ask that our members are asking the General Assembly is for a commercial requester fee. A lot of times our members get requests from businesses and large conglomerates, and they're basically data mining for new customers. We think that the taxpayers should not be subsidizing that operation, and all we're asking for is a simple fee that would help with the personnel costs.
And Amy, I understand you're in favor of some kind of overhaul of the system for public notice advertising?
Correct, yes. Oftentimes our associations, our local government associations, can all work together on particular issues. The right to know law is one of those. So is public notice advertising. This did make our priority list this year, and not to say we wouldn't work on it otherwise, but it is on our priority list to bring it to the attention of the General Assembly. We have a situation in Pennsylvania where communities, when they are going to take action or have a meeting, they need to provide notice to the public, and the only way they can do it right now is through a print newspaper. And we are finding that across the Commonwealth, print newspapers are going out of business. They are not publishing on a daily basis anymore, sometimes only weekly or a couple times a week, or they're going completely online, and there's no print paper for the municipality to actually put their notice in. Or they have to go through a timing process, so that they get the notice in for the print according to the print publication, but they're also having to make sure that the notice is in on time so that the local governing body can take action when needed. So it's getting to be very complicated and very difficult to provide that information to the public, which is important. There needs to be public information. There needs to be transparency at the local level with what is happening. But because our law has not been modernized to meet what's happening in today's society, local governments are having issues. So we are advocating for the ability to put public notices on municipal websites. It would be available to anyone to go to a website and see what is happening in the community, what notices have been posted. It would be free to taxpayers. Right now, our taxpayers are subsidizing the newspaper industry because they're paying, essentially the tax dollars are paying for the advertisements that go into the newspapers.
Amy, how long has this debate been going on? It sounds like something that could potentially go back years.
It has gone back years. It is, I can't tell you exactly how long, but I'm going to guess as long as I've been working at the league.
Why do you suppose there'd be any resistance to this change?
Well, there's resistance because naturally the newspapers want to be sure that transparency is being provided to their customers, to the residents of Pennsylvania, to anyone who wants to read a newspaper.
They have an association and lobbyists too.
They do, and it's strong. And there's just, I think, I think that we're getting to the point where something could happen in the next couple of years because of the way the newspaper industry is changing. But they have been able to hold the line with the argument that not everyone is going to have access to an online paper or a website to look at the public notices. But I think, as I said, I think the times are changing enough that, and it's getting to be so difficult for communities to comply with the law that something has got to change.
Simply because newspapers are declining.
Exactly.
And
yes.
this mandate is something that was from the last century. Most people got their news in the newspapers. Now this has changed. More people are online. We really need to save taxpayer money and do it a more efficient way and put it on municipal websites or even on a state website. That would be, I think that would provide even more transparency.
Sherene, do the counties have an interest in this debate about public advertising?
Not so much on public advertising, but I would like to say about the right to know request, the vexatious request.
Please do.
That certainly does affect counties, especially at elections time. We saw that in especially the presidential races, but even during the off-year elections, there are a number of requests that come in, and mostly from people who are genuinely interested and would like some information. But we did see those vexatious requests, and it takes a toll on the staff. There's only so many hours in a day, and you're already stretched at that time. So we do have an interest in that, reforming some of those things related to right to know requests. We understand that's a very important provision for transparency and all good things. But it has taken a toll in some ways on county government as well.
Sherene, while you have the floor, let's consider another legislative priority of the counties, and it has to do with 911 services. What's going on there? What's needed? Yeah,
one of our legislative priorities is the 911 surcharge, reauthorization of that, and also statute updates. The surcharge that is in place now is going to run out, so to speak, January of 2026. And while that might look like a long time from now, we know that the months will fly by. So as another core responsibility, the 911 system for county governments, we're very serious about ensuring that it is stable, that we have all the right people on the job in those seats so that, when that individual in their greatest time of need is calling, there's somebody to answer that call and make the connections for first responders to get to the problem. So we've seen that the surcharge, which is a charge added to the phone bills, was up till 2024. Last year it was $1.65, and it was changed to increased to $1.95 last year. We would really ideally like to see it in the $2 and some cents kind of range, just because we know the costs are increasing, technology is continuing to increase. And we want to ensure that every single person who may need that service can get that. So the funding is not keeping pace. We are advocating for that increase and also the reauthorization of the statute in general. Modernizing, just like any of the issues we talk about, as we problem solve every day, it's really a lot of times comes down to modernizing what's in existence. So that's what we're talking about here for 911 too.
Sherene, what is the rate approximately of the call volume going into 911? In other words, how important is it that we get on this sooner instead of later?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know that I know the exact answer to that in terms of the call rate volume. I think that as cell phones have increased in usage, there are many more touch points for people for those calls to be coming in. And we know that that the current system can handle, because the amount of funding from the state has lessened over the years. We are seeing the taxpayer have to shoulder up to 20 or 25% of that. And if the statute and the increase to the surcharge is an increase, we're going to see that burden become greater onto the taxpayer. So that is what we're trying to prevent. As we know, county budgets, just like state budgets, are stretched, and so we're wanting to very much advocate for that increase, and sooner rather than later.
Can you tell?
Start to look at their budgets, very soon, in a few months. In fact, a lot of counties are just continually looking at budgets, and so we need to kind of know those numbers sooner rather than later.
Can you tell us, Sherene, about the next generation of technology as far as 911 is concerned? I understand they're calling it next generation 911, and somehow the internet comes into play. Explain that, please.
Yeah, so in the transfer from analog to digital, there are a number of things pieces of equipment that come into play. And so there's a cost to that, upgrading of radios, ensuring that all the different first responders, fire, EMS, Police have equipment that can communicate with each other. Sometimes you see individuals needing to carry two pieces of equipment, and that's certainly not efficient. And so, yes, the next gen in a lot of counties are there, and we're going there. And again, that's just another reason for an increase in that surcharge, so that we can sustain that. We know, we try very hard to work with intergovernmentally so that we can maximize these efforts. But even at that, we know the costs are going to increase, and we're very serious about keeping that service in play for our residents.
Ron and Amy, here's a topic, a legislative priority that both your groups have in common, and it has to do with first responders. Amy, why don't you start us off on what's happening there and what you'd like to see done?
Sure. Thank you for that question. We've heard for many years now that there's a crisis in the volunteer fire and EMS community, and it just seems to get worse year after year. And we're also seeing now in urban communities that it's difficult to hire police. There's not enough candidates. Police are either leaving the industry altogether or maybe moving to suburban and rural communities more than cities. So from our membership's perspective, we really need to take a hard look at this as a state and figure out a way forward that consolidates services, shares services, provides funding for communities to communities and their volunteers to work together to figure out the best way forward, whether that be on a larger scale or just supporting the need for volunteers, both and the need for EMS workers. It just seems like we can't continue to move in the slow direction that we've moved in. We really need to make this a priority, because we're getting to the point where community leaders, those in the public safety arena, are concerned that when the emergency call goes out, there's not going to be someone there to respond. It's very serious.
Ron, how do you attract and keep quality candidates? And I mean, after all, volunteering isn't what it used to be.
That's correct, Larry. It really is a challenge to recruit and then to retain those good volunteers. What we've done in the past, we've worked on tax credits at the local level, property and earned income tax. We'd like to see one at the state level for volunteer firefighters and EMS employees. But really, one of the things that hurts us with our municipal police departments is the civil service mandate in boroughs. If you have over 3 officers, you're required to go through a whole host of hiring, testing, and legal public advertising, and it really is not necessary. And you see other states moving away from that now because of the competitive nature of hiring law enforcement officers. So our members are asking the General Assembly to remove that mandate, so that just like the second-class townships, they do not have civil service, and they can effectively and quickly hire police officers. So we're asking for that as well.
Amy, I understand the Municipal League is looking into different equipment for police to use for clocking speeders. Why is that an issue? In other words, why is there a desire to change technology for clocking speeders?
Well, this is a perennial issue for our association, and really, it's coming. The overall purpose of a change in the law, a modernization of the law, is public safety. We're in a situation where in communities, police officers really have the equipment that they currently use for enforcing speed is outdated. It's obsolete. And we're the only state in the nation that does not allow local police officers to use radar to clock speeders. So when residents call and say there's people speeding through my neighborhood, there's very little that can be done without, it takes a lot of effort to set up the current technologies, the NRAD or VASCAR technologies, and it's not, as I said, it's obsolete equipment. So to be able to use radar would be highly useful just in the fact that it's easier to use, it's more efficient, more effective, and it would potentially slow down speeders through neighborhoods because they know that it's a much more efficient piece of equipment that's being used by our local law enforcement.
Ron, we just have a couple minutes left. I'm going to give you the last question. Okay. It has to do with broadband expansion. We still aren't where we ought to be as far as availability of broadband is concerned, right?
That's right, yeah. A few sessions ago, the General Assembly established the Broadband Authority to really drive out some of these dollars that were coming from the federal government. It's a slow process. It is a slow process, but the goal is to get to fully wire the areas that do not have it. Our members, certainly a lot of those that are in those areas that are underserved by broadband, so we're really looking forward to full deployment of that essential service.
Our guests have been Ron Grutza from the PA State Association of Boroughs, Amy Sturges from the PA Municipal League, and Sherene Hess from the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania. Thanks, everyone. PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Representative Jason Ortite about eating disorder awareness.
Welcome to our program. You've proposed bills to raise awareness for eating disorders. Why is this important?
Well, House Bill 190 is really important because, as social media has really become relevant and ramped up over the last 15 years, we've seen a lot of issues amongst our teenagers, predominantly amongst young females, with body issues in general, just with all the filters that are on all these apps to make things look different than what they really are. We're starting to see more of these issues come up where kids are having eating disorders and parents just aren't seeing the warning signs that are out there to stop this at the beginning instead of trying to intercept it in the middle of it or towards the end of a major problem.
You mentioned the warning signs of an eating disorder. Could you explain what those are for people who may not be familiar?
Sure. I mean, from some of the situations that have been brought to me from people around the state, I've had a mom who maybe wasn't aware of what was going on with her daughter, who was maybe eating dinner and then going upstairs to the bathroom and throwing up immediately after, who wasn't eating while they were at school because they didn't feel like they were skinny enough or they weren't pretty enough. We've had survivors of eating disorders who basically come in and, they've been struggling with this their entire life about how their body looks and what they eat and how much they eat, and just seeing like the reactions on the mental psyche of teenagers and even younger kids to these days, especially with the peer pressures of social media, and to look like, things that aren't even real, like in magazines and on cameras. It's really impacted our youth. And you see some of those warning signs, and that's what part of the bill is to have the Department of Health and the Department of Education work together with experts to put those warning signs out there, whether they're on a website, through the school district, whether they're through an email. This is really about informing parents on what factors to look for, what warning signs are popping up that your child might actually be suffering from an eating disorder that might not otherwise realize or see in their day-to-day life.
You mentioned the Department of Education being involved in this task force that you're creating. Why do you feel like schools should be involved in raising awareness for eating disorders?
So right now, the schools are basically a repository of everything. When parents are looking for information, they go to the school. And it's the easiest place to hit all of the students across the entire state. We've looked at other different avenues, like maybe a doctor's office. We've looked at maybe community libraries. The problem is they don't have the volume and the visitation and the overall popularity that a school has. So when a student is having a problem, or your kid's having a problem, a lot of times the parents will go directly to the school. So our thought originally was, let's start with the school districts. That's a good repository for information. So when a parent will call, or basically the thought was, let's put this on a website. It's easy, it's cheap. Basically, it's free for a school district to put those warning signs on there, and it serves as a resource for parents to check out and peruse at their leisure. And I know people could very easily do Google searches these days and just go online, but that means they're being proactive, whereas the school is actually providing this information, and you know that it's solid information because it's coming from our Department of Health in tandem with the Department of Education. The information has been vetted. You know that it's true, and these are things that you can count on. Whereas when you go on the internet and you do your own search, you may not find information that is reliable and something that you can actually trust in. So that was part of the idea of bringing in the experts, putting together this task force to really come up with the ideas behind it and put some real information behind it with the expert knowledge.
Where is this bill about the task force in the legislative process currently?
So a couple weeks ago, it passed the full House. So the bill will go to the Senate. My guess is it will probably end up in the Senate Education Committee. And my hope is that they will pick it up and look at it and hopefully run it. So we've got to get it through the Senate and to the governor's desk. If the bill doesn't run in the Senate, there's always another way to get this across the finish line. This is something we could look at possibly adding into the school code as part of a budgeting process, even though there's no budgetary requirement to this or financial component to it. It's something that could just simply be added to the school code and signed into law along with the budget. So we're looking at it from two different avenues. Again, this is I don't think anyone would contest that we want to give information to parents. I think that's a really good idea. We need to arm our parents with information about their kids so they can look for these warning signs. And again, not having any real financial component to it, I think makes it a little bit easier of a lift as well.
Representative Jason Ortite, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you very much. Before we go, a reminder about On the Issues. The governor is proposing a tax on so-called skill games. Mike Barley from Pacematic, a company that develops software for skill games, joins us for On the Issues on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Then right after that, we'll talk about a new report called No Hate in Our State. The executive director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, Chad Dion Lassiter, will tell us about the report on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.